The relentless Egyptian sun beat down on the desert sands as Dr. Julian Parker led his team of archaeologists deeper into the dunes near Luxor. After weeks of fruitless digging, they had nearly given up hope of finding anything significant. That was until Layla Hassan, Julian's trusted assistant, uncovered a faint outline in the sand. "Julian, over here!" she called, her voice crackling with excitement. Julian wiped the sweat from his brow and rushed over, followed by the rest of the team. Beneath the sand, they uncovered the entrance to a tomb, unmarked and untouched for millennia. Strange symbols, unlike any Julian had seen before, lined the entrance. "This is it," Julian breathed. "We found something extraordinary." But as the team prepared to enter, a chill ran down Layla's spine. She glanced at the villagers who had been helping with the dig. Their expressions were grim, and one of the older men muttered something in Arabic, shaking his head. "What did he say?" Julian asked, noticing her hesitation. "He said, 'Leave it buried.'" But Julian's curiosity had already overtaken him. Inside the tomb, the air was thick and stifling. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, but they were unlike any Egyptian hieroglyphs they had studied. They told no stories of gods or kings, but depicted twisted forms, rituals of blood, and a figure draped in shadow. At the center of the tomb lay a massive stone sarcophagus, larger and more ornate than anything Julian had ever seen. Gold and precious stones glittered in the dim light of their torches, but there was something off about it, an aura of dread that permeated the air. "We shouldn't open this," Layla whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "It doesn't feel right." Julian ignored her. This could be the discovery of the century. With great effort, the team pried open the sarcophagus. Inside lay the body of Nekbet-Re, the cursed pharaoh. Unlike other mummies, Nekbet-Re's body was shockingly well preserved, his skin taut over his skeletal frame, his eyes sunken but eerily intact. As the lid opened, a rush of cold air filled the tomb, sending shivers down their spines. The team stood in silence, staring at the ancient king whose dark legacy had been forgotten by time. But Julian's excitement overshadowed his caution. "Get the cameras! We're documenting everything!" The excitement of the discovery quickly wore off as strange things began happening around the camp. The temperature, even in the blazing desert, dropped inexplicably. The electronic equipment they used to document the tomb malfunctioned, flickering on and off without explanation. Layla noticed it first, the whispers. Late at night, she would hear faint voices, like the murmuring of a crowd, just out of earshot. At first, she thought it was the wind, but as the nights grew colder, the voices became clearer. Julian dismissed her concerns, chalking it up to the strain of the dig. "It's just nerves," he said, not looking up from his notes. But that night, Layla saw something that chilled her to the bone. As she walked past the sarcophagus, now housed in their makeshift research tent, she could have sworn the pharaoh's eyes were watching her. The following morning, Ahmed, one of the younger archaeologists, was found dead in his tent. His face was twisted in horror, his eyes wide open as if he had seen something no human should witness. There were no marks on his body, no signs of struggle. It was as if fear itself had killed him. The team was in shock. The villagers who had been assisting them fled, refusing to set foot near the dig site again. "The curse," one of them muttered as they left. "The curse has begun." Layla begged Julian to stop the excavation. "Something is wrong here, Julian. We should leave. Now." But Julian, ever the skeptic, refused. "We're too close, Layla. We found something incredible. We can't just walk away." But deep down, even Julian could feel it, something ancient, Something dark had awakened. That afternoon, as the sun set over the desert, a lone figure approached the camp. He was an old man, his face weathered and his eyes full of sorrow. He had been a child when his grandfather had told him stories about the cursed pharaoh, Nekbet-Re. "You have disturbed a grave that should never have been opened," the old man said in a raspy voice, his eyes fixed on Julian. Nekbet-Re was a pharaoh of dark magic. He practiced forbidden rituals, sacrificed his people for immortality. His curse is real. Julian shook his head. "These are just stories, myths. We found no evidence of his power grows with each life he claims," the old man interrupted. "Leave now, before it's too late." Layla listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the truth in the old man's words. But Julian, blinded by ambition, refused to listen. The atmosphere at the dig site had grown tense and fearful. After Ahmed's mysterious death, the team felt the weight of the curse pressing down on them. Most of the workers had already fled, leaving only a few brave, or stubborn, archaeologists behind. One of them was Professor Murray, an expert in ancient languages and a longtime colleague of Julian. Despite the strange occurrences, he remained skeptical. But that night, as he examined some inscriptions near the sarcophagus, something changed. Murray had been studying late into the night, completely absorbed in deciphering the strange symbols. Suddenly, a chilling gust of wind blew through the research tent, extinguishing the lights. The temperature dropped rapidly, and a soft, whispering sound filled the air. "What the hell?" Murray muttered, looking around. His flashlight flickered as he moved to check the sarcophagus. But before he could take another step, felt an icy hand on his shoulder. He turned sharply, but there was nothing there. His breath quickened, and the whispering grew louder, more urgent. The shadows in the room seemed to lengthen, creeping closer to him. Panicked, Murray tried to run, but the darkness seemed to swallow him whole. The next morning, Murray was gone. No one saw him leave, and his tent was left undisturbed. The only trace of him was a smear of blood on the floor near the sarcophagus. Layla was the first to find it. "He's gone," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Julian, this is no longer an excavation. This is a nightmare." But Julian, though clearly shaken, still refused to stop. "We can't abandon this. Murray wouldn't want us to. We're close to understanding something. Ancient. Something important." After Murray's disappearance, Julian began experiencing vivid, terrifying dreams. In his sleep, he found himself wandering the corridors of the tomb, its walls closing in around him. At the center of the tomb stood Nekbet-Re, his form shrouded in shadow, his eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, locked onto Julian. "You will free me," Nekbet-Re whispered, his voice echoing through Julian's mind. "I will rise again." Julian awoke each night drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. He tried to dismiss the dreams as mere manifestations of stress, but they felt too real, too personal. And with each night, the dreams grew more intense. Nekbet-Re's voice became clearer, his presence stronger, as if he was slowly seeping into Julian's waking life. During the day, Julian began seeing strange figures in the corner of his vision, shadowy shapes that would disappear when he turned to look. Objects in the camp moved on their own, and strange symbols began appearing in the sand around the site. Layla, who had been noticing the change in Julian, confronted him. "You're not yourself anymore, Julian. This curse, it's affecting you." "I'm fine," he snapped, though the haunted look in his eyes said otherwise. "We just need to push forward. The answers are here." But Layla wasn't convinced. The pharaoh's influence was growing, and she feared that Julian was falling under his spell. Determined to stop the curse, Layla threw herself into research. She spent hours poring over ancient texts, searching for anything that could explain what they had unleashed. The more she read, the more terrified she became. Nekbet-Re had not been an ordinary pharaoh. He had practiced forbidden rituals, tapping into dark, otherworldly forces in his quest for immortality. According to legend, he had enslaved his people, sacrificing thousands to fuel his dark magic. In the end, the people rebelled, and a group of powerful priests had sealed him in the tomb, cursing his soul to remain trapped for eternity. But Layla discovered something even more disturbing: a prophecy. According to the ancient texts, if Nekbet-Re's tomb was ever opened, his soul would be freed, and his power would begin to grow again. He would use the life force of those around him to restore his physical body and bring about a reign of terror unlike anything the world had ever seen. Layla rushed to Julian with her findings, but he brushed her off. "It's just superstition. There's no prophecy." "Julian, you have to listen," she pleaded. "This isn't just an archaeological dig anymore. We've awakened something terrible." But Julian, increasingly obsessed with his work, refused to believe her. His mind was consumed by thoughts of Nekbet-Re, of the power hidden within the tomb. He couldn't let go. As the days passed, the curse's hold on the camp grew tighter. The cold drafts became more frequent, the whispers louder. Those who remained on the team began experiencing their own nightmares, visions of Nekbet-Re beckoning them to join him. The sarcophagus itself seemed to pulse with dark energy. Layla noticed that the symbols on its surface were slowly changing, shifting into new forms she couldn't decipher. It was as if the pharaoh's power was growing with each passing day. One night, Layla awoke to find her tent freezing cold, her breath visible in the air. She heard soft footsteps outside, moving slowly through the camp. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped outside, her heart pounding in her chest. The camp was deserted, but in the distance, she saw a figure, tall, shadowy, with glowing eyes. The figure moved silently, gliding across the sand toward the tomb. As it approached the sarcophagus, it turned and looked directly at her. Layla gasped, stumbling back in terror. The figure was Nekbet-Re, his ghostly form barely visible in the moonlight. He raised a hand, and Layla felt a cold force push against her, knocking her to the ground. When she regained her senses, the figure was gone. But the sarcophagus remained open, its dark interior seeming to swallow the light. The surviving members of the team were slowly losing their grip on reality. Julian had become distant, spending hours alone with the sarcophagus, muttering to himself. He rarely slept and barely spoke to anyone, his mind consumed by the pharaoh's presence. Layla tried to rally the team, but fear had taken hold. One by one, they began to break down, haunted by the spirits of the tomb. Some saw shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their vision. Others heard whispers in languages they couldn't understand. Dr. Patel, one of the lead archaeologists, was the next to fall. He had always been rational and level-headed, but after several sleepless nights, he snapped. He burst into the research tent, screaming about visions of Nekbet-Re, claiming that the pharaoh was coming for them all. "He's watching us!" "He's inside our minds," Patel shouted, his eyes wide with terror. "We're all going to die here!" Despite Layla's attempts to calm him, Patel ran out into the desert, disappearing into the night. They found him the next morning, his body frozen and twisted in an expression of unimaginable horror. The curse was tightening its grip, and Layla knew they were running out of time. Desperate for answers, Layla continued her research into the curse. She uncovered an ancient ritual that Nekbet-Re had planned to use to make himself immortal. It involved the sacrifice of numerous lives and the harnessing of dark energy through forbidden spells. The pharaoh had been on the verge of completing the ritual when he was sealed away by the priests. But there was more. Layla discovered that the ritual could still be completed. If Nekbet-Re's spirit was allowed to gather enough energy, he would rise again, stronger than before. His body would regenerate, and he would bring about a new age of terror. The ritual required blood, sacrifices to fuel the dark magic. And Layla realized with growing horror that the team's deaths had been feeding the pharaoh's power. Each life lost was another step toward his full resurrection. "We have to stop this," Layla said to Julian, who had become more withdrawn and obsessive by the day. "If he completes the ritual, there will be no stopping him." But Julian, entranced by the power he believed Nekbet-Re could offer, no longer cared about the consequences. "Don't you see, Layla? This is the greatest discovery of our time. Nekbet-Re's knowledge could change everything." Layla stared at him, her fear turning to anger. "He's using you, Julian. This curse is real, and it's killing us." But Julian had already gone too far. His mind was lost to the pharaoh's influence, and Layla realized that she could no longer trust him. Layla's fears about Julian deepened. He spent more time alone in the tomb, often locking himself inside with the sarcophagus for hours, only emerging with a distant, almost haunted look in his eyes. He began to write strange notes in his journal, cryptic messages about power, immortality, and ancient wisdom. But what troubled Layla most was his secrecy. He was clearly hiding something from her. One night, while Julian was away in the tomb, Layla snuck into his tent. She sifted through his notes and found something chilling. Julian had begun communicating with Nekbet-Re directly. His journal was filled with dialogues between him and the pharaoh's spirit, discussing the rituals of resurrection and power. Worse still, Julian seemed convinced that he could control Nekbet-Re, harness his dark magic for his own purposes. "He thinks he can control a being like this?" Layla whispered, horrified. "He's lost his mind." Layla took the journal and confronted Julian the next morning. "You've been talking to him," she accused, holding up the notes. "You're feeding the curse." Julian's face darkened. "You don't understand, Layla. Nekbet-Re's power is real. He can grant us immortality, control over death itself. We can use this." Layla stepped back, shocked. "He's using you, Julian. This isn't power, it's death. You're going to get us all killed." But Julian's mind was clouded by the pharaoh's influence. His obsession had blinded him to the danger, and Layla realized that Julian might now be the greatest threat of all. Feeling more desperate than ever, Layla decided to seek help from the elderly villager who had warned them before. She found him in his small, humble home near the edge of the village, sitting by the fire with an ancient book in his hands. "You've come because you know the truth now," he said without looking up. "Nekbet-Re's curse cannot be undone so easily." Layla nodded, her voice shaky. "There has to be a way to stop him. You know something, don't you?" The old man sighed deeply. "My family has protected this land for generations. We were tasked with ensuring that Nekbet-Re's tomb was never disturbed. But you have awakened him, and now his power grows." Layla felt a chill run down her spine. "Is there a way to stop him?" "There is only one way," the man said. "The curse can be contained, but it requires a great sacrifice. Someone must offer their life willingly to seal Nekbet-Re's spirit back into the sarcophagus." Layla felt her stomach drop. "A sacrifice?" "Yes," the man said gravely. "It is the only way to prevent the curse from spreading. Without it, Nekbet-Re will rise again, and his darkness will consume everything." Layla knew what this meant. Someone in the team would have to die to save the rest. But who? And how could she convince anyone to make that sacrifice? Layla returned to the camp, her mind racing. She gathered the remaining members of the team and explained the villagers' warning. The air was thick with fear and uncertainty as the reality of their situation sank in. "We have to stop this," Layla said, her voice trembling. "But it's going to take a sacrifice. If we don't do this, Nekbet Ray will rise, and none of us will survive." The team members looked at one another in shock. No one wanted to be the one to make the ultimate sacrifice, but they all understood the stakes. Julian, however, remained silent, standing apart from the group, with a cold, detached look on his face. Layla noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "Julian," she called, her voice breaking through the tense silence. "You understand what's happening. We need to stop this." Julian smiled faintly, his eyes distant. Perhaps Nekbet Ray's power isn't something we should fear. Perhaps we could use it, Layla." Layla shook her head, her heart pounding. "This isn't a game, Julian. You can't control him." But Julian's mind was already lost. He had fully embraced Nekbet Ray's promise of immortality, blinded by the illusion of power. Layla realized then that Julian would never make the sacrifice, and might even stop anyone who tried. As the team debated their next move, a terrifying event shook the camp. That night, the sarcophagus began to glow with an eerie, unnatural light. The symbols on its surface twisted and shifted, becoming more prominent, more aggressive. The air grew colder than ever before, and the ground itself trembled. Layla watched in horror as the pharaoh's body, once decayed and desiccated, began to change. His flesh slowly regenerated, his bones knitting together, his form becoming more lifelike by the second. "Nekbet Ray is awakening," Layla whispered, her heart racing. "He's almost fully restored." The remaining team members backed away, fear etched across their faces. They were no longer dealing with just a spirit. Nekbet Ray was returning to the physical world, and his resurrection was nearly complete. Layla ran to the ancient texts she had been studying, frantically searching for a way to stop the process. But time was running out, and Nekbet Ray's presence grew stronger with each passing moment. Late that night, Julian disappeared. Layla had been watching him closely, but during a moment of distraction, he vanished into the desert. The only clue to his whereabouts was a hastily scribbled note left behind in his tent. The note was cryptic, full of ramblings about power, destiny, and the resurrection of Nekbet Ray. Julian had fully succumbed to the pharaoh's influence, and Layla knew that if she didn't find him soon, he would complete the ritual, bringing Nekbet Ray back to life fully and unleashing a wave of terror upon the world. Layla searched the camp, calling out his name, but there was no answer. In her gut, she knew where he had gone. Julian had taken the final steps to complete the ritual deep inside the tomb. With little time left, Layla gathered the remaining team members and told them about the villagers' ancient ritual, a binding spell that could trap Nekbet Ray's spirit back inside the sarcophagus. The ritual required the use of ancient relics that Layla had recovered from the tomb, combined with powerful incantations from the ancient texts. But it also required a life. Someone had to willingly offer themselves as a vessel to contain the pharaoh's dark energy. Layla knew that the ritual might not be completed in time, but it was their only chance. With no other options, she began the preparations, praying that she would be able to stop Nekbet Ray before Julian completed the resurrection. But even as they prepared, Layla knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Someone had to make the ultimate sacrifice. Layla and the team descended into the tomb, their hearts heavy with fear. As they approached the sarcophagus, they saw Julian standing at its foot, chanting in a language none of them could understand. His eyes were wide, his face pale, as Nekbet Ray's spirit swirled around him. The air crackled with dark energy, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Nekbet Ray's form, now almost fully restored, loomed over them, his eyes burning with malice. "Julian, stop!" Layla shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the pharaoh's wrath. With a flick of his hand, Nekbet Ray sent a blast of dark energy toward the group, knocking one of the team members to the ground. They screamed in agony as their life force was drained, their body withering into dust before their eyes. Layla knew that the time had come. They had to act now, or it would be too late. Layla, clutching the ancient relics, began the binding ritual, chanting the incantations she had memorized from the texts. The air around her shimmered as the magic took hold, and Nekbet Ray roared in fury, sensing what she was trying to do. Julian, still entranced by the pharaoh's power, tried to stop her, lunging toward Layla with wild eyes. But another team member, summoning the last of their strength, tackled Julian to the ground, holding him back long enough for Layla to finish the ritual. As the final words of the incantation left her lips, the sarcophagus began to glow once more, this time with a brilliant, blinding light. Nekbet Ray screamed, his form twisting and contorting as the magic pulled him back into the tomb. But the ritual wasn't complete. The sacrifice had to be made. Without hesitation, one of the remaining team members stepped forward, offering themselves as the vessel. They collapsed to the ground, their body consumed by the binding magic, sealing Nekbet Ray inside the sarcophagus for eternity. The tomb was silent. Nekbet Ray's spirit was gone, sealed once again within the sarcophagus. The air was still, the darkness lifted. But the cost had been great. Many lives had been lost, and the survivors were left to pick up the pieces. Layla stood before the sarcophagus, her heart heavy with grief. Julian was gone, taken by the pharaoh's curse, lost to the darkness. She had done what she could to stop the curse, but the price had been high. As she and the remaining team members prepared to leave the site, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that the curse still lingered, that Nekbet Ray's dark influence had left a permanent mark on them all. But for now, the tomb was sealed, and the curse, for the time being, was contained.